Good morning and happy November. I don't know about you, but I am wondering if we actually got all of the days in October because I feel like we were gypped for part of the month that went by so fast. But I hope you're having a great start to your Monday. And today, I just wonder if maybe like me, you struggle sometimes in believing lies from the enemy. One of the lies that the enemy has frequently targeted me with, and it has surfaced many, many times through each season of my life, is a lie that the Lord has actually kind of showed me, Jenna, this is true. It's a lie, but it is true at the same time. I know that's confusing, but the lie is that I'm not enough. As a new graduate in the workplace, I often felt like a complete fraud and did not feel like I was enough. As a new wife, I was suddenly exposed to all of this sin that was in my heart that I had no idea was in there as I tried to do life side by side with a wonderful but fellow sinner. And I knew yet again on a new level that I was not enough. As a first-time mom, I was really confronted with this lie/truth of not being enough. And then as a mom for the second time, struggled with that again. And then as a mom of number 3 and 4 that came at the same time, I tasted that on a whole new level, that I am not enough. And every time through every different season of my life, that would send me into this pit of self-deprecation, of why even bother? I'm just going to throw in the towel. I'm not enough for this. And I would often in those seasons become so overwhelmed because I would go and immediately make a list of my lack, a list of all the things that I needed to fix about myself or things I needed to do more of or to do less of. All things that seemed to affirm that I was, in fact, not enough. Paul writes in 2 Corinthians chapter 12 about an incredible vision that the Lord gives him of a man who is taken up into heaven. And then he writes this in verses 7 and 10 after explaining about that vision. He says, "So to keep me from being conceited, because of the surpassing greatness of the revelations, a thorn was given me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to harass me, to keep me from becoming conceited. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord about this, that it should leave me. But he said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, then, I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong.'" We don't know exactly what this thorn was that Paul was referring to, but we know that it was a regular reminder in his life of his lack. It was a regular reminder that he was not enough. It was something that reminded him often of his own weaknesses. But instead of doing what I did and allowing that to cause him to want to throw in the towel, Paul instead decided to boast in the thing that regularly reminded him that he was not enough. He chose to relish in it, to celebrate it, because it turned his eyes to focus on the total sufficiency of the Lord. His own not enoughness turned him to the only one who always is enough. His lack pointed him to the power of the Lord that is perfected and highlighted when it resides in a weak and not enough vessel. At the end of Colossians chapter 1, Paul writes about his ministry. He references his sufferings and his stewardship of what God has called him to. And in verse 27, he mentions the mystery of the new covenant, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory. And then in verse 29, Paul says, "For this I toil, struggling with all his energy that he powerfully works within me." Paul struggled and he toiled and he regularly dealt with a thorn in his flesh that reminded him of his weaknesses and all the ways that he was not enough to do what God had called him to do. But Paul also knew that that was not the end of the story. That was only a segue into better knowing the power of Christ that lived in him and the energy of Christ that resided in Paul, that Christ alone would use to work within and through Paul. Paul was not enough, and we aren't either, but that's not the end of the story. That is the start of the gospel story, the story that secured my salvation and my justification is the same story that enables me to fully acknowledge my lack in all the ways that I'm not enough, and then to turn my eyes to the one whose power is actually perfected in my weakness, to surrender just a little bit more to the power of Christ that actually resides inside of me, to be worked powerfully in me by Christ. So I can take my list of all the ways that I'm not enough, and I can lay it at his feet. As women, we can be so critical of ourselves. You name the earthly role, relationship, or responsibility, and we are just so quick to find ways that we don't measure up. Let's allow the Lord to take what the enemy means for evil, telling us that we're not enough, and let's instead, by the grace of the Lord, allow it to be used for good. Allow the Lord to use it to turn our eyes to him, the one who already did for me what I could never do for myself by living a perfect life, dying the death that I deserved, defeating sin and the grave. I am not enough, but I know who is. And he is not way up in the sky. He's right here. He dwells inside of me. He is my hope of glory. And he will work his energy powerfully within me to magnify his strength in my weakness. And he'll do the same for you. I hope you have a great week.